Awesome. I'm just let me just get this posted here.
All
Just letting
right.
people know I'm on LinkedIn doing this with you.
Sweet. Hey, everybody. My name is Tito Amogus. I'm your host here at Shift the Journey. Today we have the esteemed Treyson Marks, a former colleague of mine. We worked together at the last stop. He is if you look at his LinkedIn, says he's a father, a mentor, and an analytics professional. You can also throw in there he's an Alteryx ACE and all around good guy. So
Subjectively.
Treyson, yeah,
Mhm.
it's I'm speaking from my journey, and so from my journey, from my experience, you're an all around good guy.
Thanks, man.
So here on
I
Shift
think
the
you're all right too.
Journey, we went. Oh, yeah,
You're all right.
I like to think that.
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't think that, but we're really hard on ourselves sometimes. And then the
Yeah.
culture I came from, it's like really there's a lot of trying to live up to perfection and all this
Mm.
stuff and lots of expectations. But I try to remember that that if you like shoot for perfection all the time, you're going to be upset with yourself because you're going to let yourself down. I
Yeah.
mean, fully honest, you can't always expect to be perfect. Nobody is. So,
Yeah.
um, anyway, so here on Shift the Journey, this is a passion of mine. I've just been chasing down this show, this podcast. It's not on podcasting platforms yet, but we have it on LinkedIn and YouTube. And basically, the premise of the show is that I come on here and I get to interview people about their journeys. There are all kinds of people that I've worked with and that have gone from one industry to another, or from one type of job to another, or just company to company in like different industries. Um, and I often get asked by people who are starting out their careers or like starting out trying to break into data. They often ask, like, how did you do it? And I tell them all the time, my story, my journey is something that is not like normal, not traditional. I guess people have said that it's not traditional
Yeah.
because I served 20 years in the military, and I got my bachelor's degree like a month before I retired, and tried to do some networking and finally got a first job. But everybody's journey is different. But I want people out there to know that there are people who have shifted careers in all different kinds of ways. So it can be done. So I just want you guys out there to be encouraged that it can be done. So today we're going to talk to Treyson about his journey. So Treyson, why don't you just go ahead and tell everybody like where you're from? I know the story, but it's cool. You can tell everybody else where you're from, and how did you get into what you do now?
Yeah. So thank you for the intro. My journey started I went to a school called the University of Central Oklahoma. It's like the third largest school in Oklahoma, and I graduated in 2011. Wasn't a great student. But I did work hard for my 2.9 GPA that I had. And in 2011, we were in the middle of the recession, and we're still in the recession, and then there was an oil bust, and Oklahoma City kind of goes the way of oil. So when you're in an oil bust, the work I was looking for was hard to come by. And I went to school for economics, which I think I just wanted like a general business degree. I didn't really know what I wanted out of that, but um, I was having a hard time finding an office job. I was competing against um, everyone from Oklahoma State, NOU, which are two gigantic universities within 45 minutes of the city. So it was rough. So I had a buddy in Phoenix, and I was like, "Hey, are you guys hiring at a trucking company called Swift Transportation?" He's like, "Yeah, come on out." And so I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona for $14 an hour, and
Wow.
Yeah, dude, I moved out there because it was a job. It took me like 6 months to find this job, um, and it was just what was it? It was just like office work. So I started with this team called accessorials, and that's really like it was part of the billing function. And then I got into accounts receivable, and I did that for a while. And it was just like, okay, you come in, really got into this like employee mode where it's like, okay, I come in, I do my work, and then eventually it's all going to work out, and I'm going to eventually have a manager position. Thinking of like the whole like traditional like how do we move up through business. Um, mindset. But there was a time where I was just like, I do not enjoy this work. I don't love being at the time I thought trucking wasn't cool, but now I really regret that frame of mind because trucking is super cool.
Mm.
I was like, how do I try something new? So I was looking around the floor of this it was a 3 floor story building. The second floor, there was a by the executive area, there was a group of folks that I would see all the time. Executives would come out and like ask them questions, and just like I'd be like, how are these folks that were my age or a little bit older, like what do they do that has the ear of these executives? And so one day I walked over there and I was like, so what is it that you guys do? And they're like, we are business analysts. And I was like, cool. What does that
Mm.
mean? And they're like, we do reporting, and to get into it, you kind of have to know SQL. I was like, okay. So in my head, I was like, this is the thing I need to know. I need to, whatever SQL is, I need to figure it out. Um, I left that job, went to do a sales job. Sales historically hasn't been my thing, or really at that time wasn't my thing because it's more of a grind. It was a different type of grind, I think, than I was
Yeah.
ready to put in for work. Um, and I was doing that, did that for 8 months. I had a really great mentor there who was just like pushing me and challenging me and just getting me to think about being happy and in business and stuff like that. So that was fun, but I really wanted to move into an analytics role, and I got actually an opportunity. Well, yeah, I got an opportunity at this organization to do some reports. I saw my boss's boss. He was every day at the end of the day for like 45 minutes would just be like copying, pasting into this Excel spreadsheet,
Oh.
and then just doing, the story, just doing all this
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
And I was like, hey, um, I'll take that over for you. Let me do that. Um, because I want to do like some reporting functions. He's like, yeah, fine, take it. And so I did it. And yeah, he wanted to have nothing to do with this. And so I
Yeah.
took it, and I didn't know how to build macros, but I was like, I know what macros are. And so I built this
Mhm.
process that like, it was a button that he clicked on a screen. And instead of this thing that took him like an hour, 45 minutes to an hour every day, at the end of the day, he now clicked a button and it like worked in 50 seconds. And he was like
Yeah.
he was like, this is so cool. Like this whole it like blew his mind. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I see the story all the time. Just like even people that do Excel work, and here's a pivot table and people's head explode. and
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
yeah, so it blew his mind. I ended up getting a job back at Swift doing a pricing analyst position, and I was like, cool, this is a good way into analytics. I'm gonna do more things over there.
Did they
And he
remember
went to
you?
bat. Sorry?
Did they remember you at Swift?
Yeah, they didn't remember me, but so my that boss went to bat with me with like the regional VP, and he's like, "Hey, we need to find a position for this kid, because this is what he did, and I think he can do a lot more." And so the RVP was like, "Okay, let's just create a position." And they didn't even ask corporate; they just made it.
Wow.
And they had a Tableau license. They're like, "Here, you can have Tableau. Figure this out." They're like, "It's
Nice.
difficult." Because so for some reason he had the Tableau license because he thought he could get into it, but he probably could have. He was an RVP, so he had other things to do. So um he
Yeah.
they gave me the license, and I just built a bunch of stuff, and I was like, and I still didn't know SQL, so I was literally just like connecting the tables. And then if you're familiar with
Yeah.
Tableau's, I don't know if they still have it in there, but the older way that you used to connect the data, it was like it was very much you put tables in, and then you draw almost like Alteryx. You draw like this is what
Yeah.
you do next. And
Like a visual query builder?
Yeah, exactly, like
Yeah.
the visual query builder. And so I did that. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, okay, looks like it's right. The numbers are everything number wise that made sense, but like
Yeah.
as far as how well it worked, it was a nightmare for like the query power that it took. And
Yeah.
so what I had asked for, I said, hey, I need like a SQL class or something to figure out how to do this better. And they were like, no, they weren't really excited about that. And then I was like, then I was talking to some folks. So the way that organization worked is that like it was headquarters and a bunch of branches, and there wasn't really analytics support at any of the branches. We were the first
Mhm.
one to do analytics support through this thing, this experiment, and I think we were very successful at it. Like we were making better decisions, had better insights into what was happening. And so
Mhm.
um a few of the other branches were like, we want you to come and support us too. And I was at the point with this branch where I was like,
Nice.
I could essentially support all of these branches.
Yeah.
And then it got blocked because I don't know if it was like a thing. Anyway, we were gonna do it. It was on the way. I was gonna get this position, and then all of a sudden it wasn't a thing, and I couldn't leave, and I was there. But at this time, like, and so I was like, okay, just immediately I was like, all right, I was looking for the next thing at that point
Mm.
because I had done a lot of I did a lot of sleeping under my desk at that job.
Oh.
Not only like my building my um the dashboards and stuff, but there was a lot of
Mhm.
like pricing stuff that needed to be done that nobody knew even really how to use Excel. And so I was just like doing all this Excel work for sales,
Ooh.
and it was okay. Again, like I was single, I didn't have kids. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, let's get my 10,000 hours in. Let's do the work. You're familiar with the 10,000 hour thing?
No. What is that?
Oh, there's a well, they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. I think it's really from the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. He talks about it in there. And because he talks about the Beatles, and like when the Beatles came onto the scene, they had already had like 10,000 hours playing together in like
Oh.
Germany and stuff like that. And they're like, by the time they were making records, they just knew how to do their thing together. And so,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I guess study after study is like 10,000 hours. It's how long it takes to become an expert in something. And so in my head, I was like, okay, got to put my hours in. I got to do the work. I got to grind it out. I got to figure, like I didn't see benefits immediately, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. I assumed some, like, you get raises here and there. Like I assumed that was going to happen, but
Mhm.
it was very much like, let's get the time in. Let's do that. All right.
Mhm.
So this job, I am like, okay, I'm looking on a way out. I move over, I move over to a company that was a mom and pop shop. I was there for like 2 months. Um, that
Mhm.
didn't work out. But I actually, funny enough, I met some contacts there that I still keep in touch with today. I was at this job for like 2 months. Didn't work out. Left. I ended up going to night
How many
transportation. Oh,
how
sorry.
many people were at that mom and pop shop? How many people did you work with?
Uh,
Was it like a
like
real
10.
small? Yeah.
Yeah, like 10 to
What
15
was
maybe.
what were the I've worked with a guy I worked with a guy who was, like, his previous company before, like, we met up. His previous company it was like 8 people,
Mhm.
and he's like, "Oh, yeah, and my boss is the CEO," and then, like, the whatever, all the different steps, they're all related, and he's like, "I can't go anywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't go up in the company, and then I'm doing a lot of things." He did say he learned a lot of things, but at
Yeah.
the same time, like, work-life balance, garbage.
Yeah.
The obvious, you know, movement
Mhm.
was to nowhere, right?
Yeah.
So you had to deal with that stuff too?
How do I put it? My problem with that, well, it wasn't even so much that there was a problem. I didn't love working there.
Mm,
Eh, let's talk. So I would. It depends on your personality. There
yeah,
are a lot of benefits to working for mom and pop shops.
yeah,
Like all those things that your buddy said. might be fine with people. Like if you
Mhm.
need to go into some place where you're not going to get fired, where you are, you're going to know everyone there, you're going to be very important part of the culture, and come end of the year, if they have a lot of money, like you get a cool bonus or something like that, like that is fine for a lot of people. And
Mhm.
if you can do that, great. Other thing is if you're young and you get to wear a lot of hats. So like if you
Yeah.
get to go in and be like, okay, these are all the things I'm going to learn. I knew SQL and I knew Excel, and learned all these things not because I wanted to necessarily, but because I had to, because it was like there
Yeah.
was no other option for the business to like function. And so
Mhm.
so these are like there are definitely opportunities to that. And
Yeah.
again, if you find, I think what I'm gonna, I guess, going forward in this story, one of the things I find is, or even with that first part, is the theme is like you find a need and you fill it, right?
Mhm.
So mom and pop shops definitely offer a lot of opportunity for like I found a need and I filled it.
Yeah.
And so you can be very successful at one of those, no problem.
Mhm.
So I'm glad for the very short time I had there, because I did get to like, I knew everybody, and I got to, people ask me questions that I wouldn't have thought I'd be asked before about like other parts of the business. And so you
Yes.
really do have to think holistically there. Like, how does everything work together?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of like your own little world, which it tends to happen with like giant organizations.
Yeah. Sometimes you can feel like you're working in a vacuum in the
Hmm.
giant organizations. Like
Yeah.
in my experience, like it was like I'm just doing whatever it is, to check off this box and this box and this box. And
Hmm.
then it's like, oh, hey, do you know so and so? Man, I don't know anybody because I'm just, in this little hole, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that could definitely happen, especially like if you're at later in the story, we'll talk about it. That a company I was at ended up getting purchased by a giant consulting company of like 250,000 people. And I was like,
Oh.
this isn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
Because even like the place I was at had maybe 1,000 people, and I felt pretty small at that point. As in a consulting organization, I felt pretty small. Like I knew my lane and I knew everybody like
Yeah.
adjacent to me, but that was it. And like we would get on quarterly calls and be like, "This is the thing, stuff we're doing." I'm like, I had no idea we were doing that stuff over there or that stuff over there. And then when
Yeah.
250,000 people, it's like there's no possible way. How do you even manage an organization that size? That's the stuff that doesn't. I mean, you must have to have some tiered, like essentially people at like a C, like a vice president role within those organizations must be operating at the same level like CEOs do at other organizations, right? Like
Yeah.
essentially you've got one CEO and then you have a bunch of little CEOs that roll up to you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it was like that. I worked for a company that was like a subsidiary of a large insurance company. So there's like all these smaller, hey, you all right, man?
Yep. Sorry. Went down the wrong.
There's all these like smaller insurance companies that have different lines. Like you have the homeowners insurance, and then you have like the high risk
Hmm.
drivers insurance, and all the different things. And also like maybe this company only writes in 5 states, this company writes policies in 22 states. But it was like that where we had it wasn't a CEO for the longest time. It was a COO and the
Hmm.
board.
Uh-huh.
And the board answered to the parent company, the CEO of the parent company,
I
who
see.
obviously answered to the board of the parent company. And it was like that all the way around. Even I remember working through I did like compliance and regulatory reporting. And so when our parent company acquired a new company, then I went and I did like all the reporting, and it was like, oh, how much did they, sell in policies? How much did they, pay out in claims, all this and that. And it was you have these like really small companies, and each one of them had their own leadership. So I imagine if it's something that big, like 250,000
Yeah.
people, that it's going to be something like that too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now that I think about it, that might have been how it went down. I wasn't there long enough to figure it out, to be honest, after the acquisition. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. It really, I just don't know how people operate in organizations that size. That's just my opinion. Um, because it's got to be difficult. Like, I don't know, just being I always felt like I was a number. Like it wasn't an
Yeah.
employee or a person.
Yeah.
It was just like I was a number on the list. So,
Yeah. I felt that way too in a larger organization. I
yeah,
felt like a number, like a number in a factory.
yeah,
We're punching out all the widgets, and I'm just it's just a number. Like it doesn't matter. And
yeah,
it can be like a psychological thing where it's like you don't feel like for a little bit there. It was my first job. Like it was for a little bit there. I felt like what I was doing didn't matter because I felt like I was working in a vacuum,
yeah,
and I didn't really have great communication with my manager. So I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what how my work affected like the big picture.
mhm,
And I didn't really see much. It wasn't until I left that I was like, oh, okay, well, that's how those things work. I still talk to some people who worked there for a long time,
yeah,
but it's it's not my cup of tea. I'm um like every quarter for the past like 4 years, I've gotten the opportunity to sit in on the Nashville Software School's data analytics. They have a roundtable every quarter,
yeah,
and they put me in a room, and people ask me about career paths, interviewing, day to day, all this stuff. And the questions that I get a lot are like, what is it like to work for a humongous company? What is it like to work for a smaller company? What are
yeah,
some of the pros and cons? And I thought, until the last stop, I thought that all smaller companies were like more laid back. But that that last stop that we were at, it was not laid back,
mhm,
but it was a good, forward momentum going on. Things were always happening, and I did tell people, yeah, when you're in a smaller organization, you get to do a lot more.
yeah,
You'll be able to see a lot more too. So,
yep,
anyway, so back to your story. So you went to night transportation.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So night transportation. I was. This is like, I would say, as if like this a very transformative year in my life in a lot of ways. 2 years in my life. Um, I went in to I after I left Echo, which was the company where I was working in the sales, and then after I left there, there were some folks at night who could then reach out to me because after they had left Echo for night, and then they had non-competes, they couldn't reach out to me. As soon as I left,
Mhm.
they were like, "Hey," um, they there's the way that night worked at the time. There's two essentially. There's a lot of sides of the business, but really generally there are asset based. So in transportation, it's like you either have trucks and trailers or you don't. And so the asset based world is like, okay, we have our trucks and trailers, we're going to do the work. And then the other side is called logistics, and that is essentially where you have clients, but you go and find smaller organizations or people to move freight for you.
Oh,
The way it's essentially like an outsourced logistics team.
yeah.
Um, and so Knight had one, and which is Echo. Echo was that model.
Okay.
Knight had both models, and uh, they, um, my one of a guy I knew, he was working there, and as soon as I moved, he went over to them. He was familiar with the work that I did at Echo, and he went to leadership at Knight Logistics and said, "Hey, you gotta look at what this kid does. If they were thinking about buying Tableau, you gotta bring them on." And so I sat down with some of the execs on that team, and they brought me on. And that was that was ultimately the reason I left that mom and pop shop. It was just like, it was a really cool opportunity. It's like, hey, build our analytics
Yeah.
team up here. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went to do that, and I was excited, and I was all about Tableau at this point. Like, I was like, Tableau's the greatest
Wow.
thing. And I went in, and like day 2, I was sitting with IT, and they're like, yeah, we're definitely not buying Tableau at all.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, all right. So what do I do now? Because that's what I've been brought in to do. And of course, I could have like left and gone to chase Tableau somewhere. But what ended up happening for me is that there was a similar situation to at Echo. There was a report that someone took 3 hours every morning to build by downloading and like and it was like a daily report of how the business was running. And so it was the leadership didn't even see where they were at until like 11, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to automate this. And I had learned enough SQL at that mom and pop shop to be like, okay, I know I can connect to SQL in Excel, so let's figure out how this works, and maybe I can build something that just like, again, clicks a button and it refreshes. And so it took me like maybe a week to figure out how the current report worked, and then the SSRS, like taking the code out of SSRS to be like, okay, yeah, I can do all this in Excel. And I built this report, and it was clicking a button and it was refreshing it. So every
Nice.
morning, like the whole leadership team could come in and they could click a button and it refreshed. And again, talk about blowing minds. One of the guys who I would consider my mentor and a really good friend of mine, his name's Shannon Breen. I actually wrote an article a few months about some of the work he's doing in transportation on LinkedIn. We can talk about that later, but he saw it, and again, it was one of those guys who just saw it and it blew their mind. And then they were like, I will be forever grateful to this man for like what he did for my career. It just changed his whole perspective on like how, and he told me this, so I can say this, like on how analytics and business work together. Like, it doesn't have to be this super cumbersome process. Like, you can automate this stuff, and you can you can make it work for you. And so at that point he was like, okay, floodgates are open. What about this? What about this? What are we doing here? What about how do I integrate this with my platform that every single like all of my employees work on? Like, how do we get all of this working together? And it like changed up the way he asked questions. And I did with that with him for a little while. So again, this is one part of the business. Then the rest of the business, so they were all on separate platforms. The logistics business was on like a SQL backed platform. The rest of the business was AS400, which is old.
I know AS400.
Yeah, you know AS400, right?
Yes, I worked with that in insurance. It was
right. Didn't you work on it at our last gig at some point in time too? I think, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
No, maybe I knew that you knew it for some reason. Anyway,
yeah.
So, but we had this problem where like the analysis from the SQL Server and the analysis for the AS400 didn't line up in some ways. We'll just talk about like financially it all made sense, but like, how do we know which client this work is? Because what would happen is that you could work would sometimes come in from on the regular business, and then it would be transferred to logistics to like to figure it out. Like, okay, we don't actually have there, make it happen. And so, but like it came over, the client in our accounting system was night transportation. So it was like, it could have been a load for a company like Coca-Cola, but we wouldn't know that, or we would know that, but like our reporting didn't know that because there was no link between the two. Anyway, so I was at a Tableau. This is like, I think it's October 2015. This is like the moment that changed my life. I was at a Tableau user group, actually at Fender, which was really cool. I was like, that's the only reason I went. Because like, it's at Fender. I was like, that's cool. I'm gonna go.
Sick.
And yeah, and while I'm there, I meet a guy who works for this company called Alteryx, and I'm like, and he's just kind of
This is
telling
the
me what it
moment.
does.
This is
Yeah,
the moment.
this is the moment. Someone at the event had kind of like demoed it. I was like, okay, that's cool. I want to figure
Yeah.
that out. But again, another really, really good friend of mine, I would consider a mentor. His name's Jeff Phipps. He ends up becoming my sales guy. He's like, because he was in charge of Phoenix at the time. So he comes in and I'm like, this is my problem. I tell him about this AS400 SQL Server problem. And he's like, well, let's see what we can do. Let's bring in Alteryx. Um, let's play around with it. And
Yeah.
so this was the sales method that like really kind of launched Alteryx, I think, where it's like get people into it, get them really excited about it, and then the business can't do anything about it once it's in there. So
Land
um,
and expand, right?
yeah, land and
Yeah.
expand. And so gave me some licenses. I went in there and I took a few other problems first, and I was like, we're solving things. It was like
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. Alteryx is cool. We're gonna do this. I got um, I solved a few problems, and then I will never forget this until the day I die. I was on the phone with Jeff, and I was like, "We solved this." He's like, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna push to make this sale. We're gonna make sure we get Alteryx in there to change how they do things in your life." He's like, "And if they don't buy it, I will get you a new job somewhere else." And like
Wow.
that may not sound huge, but like as like a 25-year-old kid who's like just kind of trying to find his way, for someone to like put that sort of faith in you, and in it was just super cool. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
it
That's
really,
huge.
yeah, it put like the safety net under me, and like there
Yeah.
was the risk had gone from potentially high to like almost nothing, because I was like, I'm gonna get, because luckily he saw in me something that was like, okay, this kid gets it. This kid's gonna figure it out. He's gonna be able to solve things. And if this organization isn't gonna be the one that supports that, then we can use them somewhere else or whatever. So anyway, get in, solve a bunch of problems. Then there's this one giant problem, which is that one that I mentioned and they had burned through a lot of money trying to like solve this in some way with like data warehousing. They were trying to use like Microsoft Dynamics CRM to,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, to like also kind of do this, and they had spent a bunch of money, and um and there's this point where I was sitting down with a one of the vice presidents, and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to try to tackle this problem with like Alteryx. And again, another like life defining moment. He was like, listen, we have paid consultants millions of dollars to like try to figure this problem out. There's no way you're going to solve, like make this, you're going
Oh,
to solve this. And I was like, all
challenge
right,
accepted.
challenge accepted. Yeah, exactly. And like within 3 months, I not only had like a working data model, I had also built like some Power BI reports. And this was like 2016, so this was like
Wow.
new Power BI. I built
Yeah.
Power BI reports on top of it, and like it was solved, quote unquote. And so like that just sort of cemented my like whole like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm working with this product, Alteryx. I got really excited about it. They were um, Alteryx got excited about me. They let me into the ACE program. I traveled a lot for them. They had me speak at events. Um, and that's something I've been a part of, fortunately, since 2017. The ACE program, that is. And I was just like bought in. And I tried to build a team up at night, and um it just ended up, well, what ended up happening is that Knight bought another company called Swift, which I was at. My first company
Oh,
I was at,
yeah.
I
Yep.
bought Swift. But they already had like a tremendous amount like IT resources.
Mhm.
And at the time I felt like what was going to happen was they were going to come in, and that my whole thing was going to be like shut down. Like I was trying to build this thing, and like it was going to be shut down because it already existed over here. And I was like, okay.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, next thing is consulting. Like that's how you really get in, and you get to like dive into a bunch of new things and learn and
Yeah.
grow. And and you think like, okay, that's where the money is, because everyone in a business talks about consultants and how much they pay consult, all that stuff. So I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. So I went into a consulting group, and so there's this team of folks up in Denver that I was told, I was like, if you can work with this team, like this is the best group of people, you will learn so much. And it was all true, but I was doing work that I hated. And I was doing work that probably wasn't really Alteryx work, but no one had.
Yeah.
I was in the ACE program at the time, and I was like, okay, yeah, we can do it with Alteryx. And rather than probably, again, I hadn't had enough life experience to be like, actually, we shouldn't do this with Alteryx. Actually, we should do it with something else. But I was like, I guess we're gonna figure it out. So
yeah,
we built this process. Took like 9 months. It was a lot of late nights. It worked. It was no longer this we were migrating off of another thing. And so we had taken a black box solution. We made it not black box. And again, met a bunch of great people there, learned a lot about, our world over there, learned a lot of SQL, learned a lot of, hey buddy, I'm on the phone. Sorry, my son just walked in.
That's okay.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Come on over. Sorry, guys. Hey. This is Max.
Hi.
Hey, Max.
I thought I locked the door. I'm sorry. Sorry, everyone. This is
Man, this is life. It's okay.
Max and Emma. So actually, this is a fairly good transition. I left that job because my wife got pregnant for my son, and I was traveling a lot on that work.
Ow.
Oh wow, you're having a rough day.
Max.
Next,
He's sitting on me.
he's sitting on you.
Yeah.
Having a, and so
What's that?
that's camera. That's a light. That's computer. That's Tito. See Tito over there. Can you say hi, Tito?
Hi.
Hi, Tito. Hi. What's that?
That's a microphone.
I want to say.
All right, guys. Hey.
I want to say hi to him. Okay.
Okay. Say hi.
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 All right. I love you guys. I need you guys to go.
Hey,
What's your question?
When I jump, I already have my head start to hurt.
Yeah, when you jump. Okay. So that means we don't jump right now. That means we go lay down and watch TV. Parenting at its finest, right? Go watch TV. Can you close the door, Emma?
I really believe that you can see what kind of a parent somebody is when they're on the spot. And you are on camera, man.
I was on camera. I'm live. So I've worked from home ever since that first consulting gig.
Yeah.
And up until probably 6 months ago, I never had to worry about them just opening the door and coming in. But now, because I think my son always knew that I was working, but then my daughter, who's now 3, she's like, "Oh, I can just open this door," and he's like, "We can do that." And so, they come in.
Oh no!
Yeah.
His eyes have been opened. Now you're in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So they come in, and it's great. I love. Like I think that's been one of the major benefits of the work from home world is that people are. I've been on important calls where like my kids come in and like just everything stops and everyone, even like we can be in the middle of a fight and people will be like, "Oh, let's talk about your kids," and I'll be like, "Okay." All right. And then they go, it's like, "Where were we?" I've really loved it. I actually, just shifting for a second. I wonder how it will affect my children growing up. My dad was in the military as well. And so he was gone. He was in airvac. So he was deployed fairly often. Not and that, that he wasn't always in airvac. Sometimes I remember from the time I was 7 to 9, he was in airvac. And that's just like this period of time that I remember, and he was gone. I remember he'd be gone for like weeks at a time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like interesting I never faulted him for it because like I knew that he was doing some mission. Like that's what I loved about growing up as a military kid. I guess I really appreciated what was going on. And so he was doing some mission, and he was always medical and helping folks out. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. This is what my dad does. This is your kid. You idolize your dad, and I'm actually very fortunate because my dad's awesome. We still hang out fairly often. But I wonder how me being home all the time, like how that's gonna like almost in the inverse affect my kids. Like if they were off for school today because it's President's Day, and so I was here the entire day. So growing up, my dad left before I woke up and was home by 5:30 or 6 every night. And and I remember every time I got home, I was like, Dad, I want to see Dad. Or we go hug Dad. We go say hi to Dad. And actually, it's funny because they'd still do that for me. But like I'm never far away. Like I'm always right here. Like Dad's always right here. I don't know. It's just I'm curious what 20 years from now looks like from the whole Dad was never around versus Dad was always around.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess one of these days I need to ask my adult kids what they felt like, when I was gone all the time.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they were small when I started deploying. I was doing aircraft maintenance. I worked on the E-8C J-Stars.
Yeah.
I worked on communication navigation systems. I was an electronics and computer guy, and was gone all the time. If I wasn't deployed, I was TDY somewhere. Usually to Nellis. So I was in Vegas all the time. Yeah. Nellis, I was at Offutt one time in Nebraska. We were supposed to be there for 4 days, and the plane got broken. We stayed there for like 6 or 7. And thankfully, it was in the dead heat of summer. And, I was stationed in Georgia. So being in Nebraska in the dead heat of summer is a lot different than being in Georgia. So it was a nice respite from the painful heat.
When were you I'm sorry, when were you when did you do 20?
95 to 2015.
Gotcha. You and my dad actually had a pretty big overlap actually.
Yeah.
What place? So did you ever, he did C9s in the 90s, and then they got rid of those, and then he was on the C-130s later in his career.
Yeah.
With AirVac. There aren't a ton of opportunities to fly in the Air Force if you're medical. So my dad was like, I can fly in. So you just like AirVac. He's like, that's what I'm going to do. And
where's he flying out of? Where was he stationed?
It was Scott from 95 to 99. He was at Scott, and from like 06 to 08, I think he was at Pope, which is no longer Pope Air Force Base.
Yeah. It's
Pope Army Airfield. It's Bragg.
Fort Bragg. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I was trying to remember which one it was. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, no, while I was in, I saw C-130s, but I didn't really know anybody. Now I did know one guy. He was like a loadmaster. He called it the 4-fan trash can, or the four fans of freedom.
Yeah, dude, it's an amazing plane. Like, I'm sorry. There's a content creator called the Habitual Line Crosser. He's on Instagram. He is the absolute best content there is, I think, on Instagram, especially if you're having any sort of military background. He is so funny. He plays a character, and they're each like different planes, and so like, it's so good.
I follow a guy who's like mandatory. What is it? Mandatory fun or something. He's like
where he's like
hilarious.
He's always like a depressed
he plays like the different parts, and the most recent thing was about the Navy, like they're
the
like,
Tiara,
well, they can put their hands in their pockets now, and it's like what? When I was in the Air Force, you could put your hands in your pockets unless you were walking. You could not walk with your hands in your pockets. It's the weirdest thing. They're like, this is why you have gloves. I'm like, my hands are still cold, but whatever, there's some things that I do not miss about the military, and that's one of them. But man, we're coming up on time soon here. I just want to ask you a couple questions, man. I mean, I feel like your journey requires like a couple of episodes. And so we talked about this like in private before. So I want you to, go ahead and sign up for another one.
Yes.
And we can talk again. But like I think your journey is like one that it's interesting to me because like you talk about having good mentorship, you talk about having, top level support where somebody would go to bat for you, like one, hey, we need him on our team, or two, hey, if this doesn't work out for you, I'm going to help you find a job. I feel like a lot of people don't get that same experience, and to know that it actually happens is very encouraging for me, and hopefully for people out there who I think a lot of times, especially for people who are new going into a job, maybe they don't feel like they really know their manager or like can trust them in a certain way, but to know that relationships like that do exist and then people can, work together like that. I think that's amazing. I tell people all the time, about work relationships and networking. You don't ever want to burn bridges. My last job, I was actually referred. So like my old boss who hired me into insurance was no longer in insurance, and I ran into him at Alteryx Inspire in 2019 in Nashville.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, talking about like data meaning, right? And he's like, oh, speaking of which, this guy Josh, he works there. So my old boss introduced me to Josh Jackson, right?
Nice.
And then just having a conversation with Josh for like a year and a half, and then finally, being hired on there. But it's like, and then like after I had a conversation with Josh the first time, he couldn't remember like, who is this guy? And he saw that Mark and I were connected on LinkedIn. And he's like, who's this guy? He's like, oh, he's the one I introduced you to. And he's like, I hired him onto his last job, and X, Y, and Z, told him all the different things. So man, it's super important to have people who go to bat for you, whether it's while you're working there, before you're working there, after you left, whatever the case may be. And so I just like, I'd like to be that person for people. And I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity to connect people, through LinkedIn, like, hey, so-and-so is looking for a job, or so-and-so is looking for somebody in some other industry, and I'd like to go find these people to go help them out. But so one of the other things that I ask when people come on here is like, what's something unique or interesting that you're involved in? You wanted to talk about it for a few minutes?
I wish you would have prepped me for this question.
Oh, that's okay. We can go to the next one if you're not comfortable.
I like it. No, it's not uncomfortable. I thought I could have had like a better, more altruistic sort of answer, but
man, it's just be raw. That's what it is.
The Alteryx community is really important to me. It's a big part. I think Alteryx community, Alteryx Designer is like one of the coolest softwares ever created. Alteryx community is the second most valuable thing that Alteryx has.
All that.
And just, I would say at this point, like at one point in time, it was like Alteryx and Tableau were like the peak communities, and now it's probably just Alteryx. And not to say that there isn't still a pretty good community over there, but due to the nature of everything that's happened in the last few years, but Alteryx community is fantastic. Last year my big side project was getting an Alteryx user group launched in Oklahoma. where we have Oklahoma City, and then we have some users that come over from Tulsa, and then I think we're going to try to, through the second half of the year, try to get a Tulsa user group set up separately so that they can exist and we can exist, and
that's
that
cool.
all works. Yeah. So yeah, that's Alteryx community. As far as like non-work stuff, my son is diagnosed. This I just want to talk about this for a second, if I might.
Oh yeah,
my son was diagnosed at a very young age with Alteryx with autism, and through that diagnosis, we ended up being very involved with like his ABA schooling and early intervention, and he's in kindergarten now. And one of the best feedback we ever got was he got diagnosed originally at 2, and then at 5 we had to diagnose him again. And when we took him to the doctor and did that diagnosis, they said that so he was like, I can't remember what the level was. There's like a spectrum to this, and they give you levels, but like he was diagnosed at one level. And then when they like, we're going to put him on this level, which is like the lowest level possible, but we wouldn't probably re-diagnose him that way because like probably all the work that we've done. So they're like, he has some attention disorders, and that is fair to say of my son. But just being really involved with my son's life through that process, it's like one of the most this moment where I had to grow up really. My daughter was born November 3rd, 2020, and like, so that was a Monday, and I think that Friday we had his autism diagnosis. And I took him in. This was during COVID too, so like masks. Took him in to do all this. It was just me. My wife my wife had just gotten out, so she was immunocompromised, all that stuff. And so, and at that time we were still taking it very seriously. And we went in, and I went in with my son. They did the diagnosis, and they're like, on the spot, they were pretty much like, yeah, we think he does have autism. And they're like, these are your options. Like, this is the path forward. And I remember it just being like so fast that I was like, oh yeah, we're going to do this thing. And then walking out with like an autism diagnosis. And,
wow.
And I just like, I remember like I sat on this bench that was outside. I just like wept, and not for like because it changed my love for my son or anything like that. But like, I was like, okay, our life's going to be a little bit harder for the next few years. And depending on how this turns up, it could be a lot harder for a long time, but that's okay. We're going to get through it. The state, I lived in Missouri at the time, the state like really stepped in, and it was awesome. We got him into an ABA school like almost immediately. And it's called the Early Start Denver model. We got him into that, and like it was like just like attacking a lot of that stuff early on. And we did it for like 3 years, real heavy. He's been going to it did a lot of great things for him. He got socialized really early. A lot of things that like, and especially during the COVID when nobody was getting socialized, like he was getting socialized. He was learning. He was very like, so like when pre-K came, no problem dropping him off. When kindergarten came, no problem dropping him off. It's been awesome. I don't, everyone's journey is different on that, but like, if the opportunity arises that you have these services, anyone who has this sort of diagnosis for their children, I would suggest going through it. So
it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because like the questions I usually ask people are, you know, tell me about your journey, you know, and how you got into what, you know, you're doing. And then the other thing is like something interesting or unique. And then the last thing usually is like something you're passionate about. But I don't need to ask you that question because I think the interesting, unique, and passionate all rolled into one right there.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I know like as a parent, you know, my kids don't have any diagnoses like that, but
Yeah.
just anything that had to do with them that was like, lifelong or like any kind of like period of time. It's easy to feel overwhelmed or helpless or
Yeah.
alone, right? And being gone all the time wasn't great either. So, but it's good. It's good. I think it's awesome that you would share that, and then you would talk about like the type of help or assistance programs, all that stuff. I'm sure there are people out there who are like don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's like when you don't know what you don't know, it's really overwhelming.
Yeah.
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 So I appreciate that, man.
Yeah. And we were fortunate just even before then, like we don't know. It was our first kid. And so we were fortunate to have really great pediatricians and living in a great system. We were in St. Louis, which is Barnes Jewish, which is with Washington University of St. Louis, and they're like a
Mhm.
top 10 research facility in the world for stuff
Wow.
like this. So we were just very fortunate to be there as well. And they're just, I mean, it took us. He was going to like a speech therapy thing, so our speech therapist and our pediatrician kind of like expedited us through the process because yeah, and we were very fortunate to be in that system. And yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So just one more quick question before we
Okay.
sign off. So if there's something that like a piece of advice that you could give somebody who's let's say thinking about career shifting,
Mhm.
what would that be? Just one piece of advice.
Yeah, one piece of advice. Be really honest about what you want with people, I think. Probably through the second half of this story that I didn't get to, and in my current career, I found that, well, even through that first stuff, like just finding a need and being like, I want to fill that, and telling the right people that I wanted to fill that are a lot of what got me these opportunities. And then also like,
Mhm.
so the opportunities are one thing, but like, what is it? Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And so,
Oh yeah.
uh, I wouldn't say I was necessarily prepared for a lot of these opportunities, but I was prepared to figure it out. And
Yeah.
I, I made a lot of my own opportunities, or I sought after the opportunities, and yeah, be honest with what you're looking for, but also be humble about it too. Like if you're like, I want to make $200,000 next year, and you tell your boss that, then they might laugh at you. If you're like, I want to find the opportunities to get there, or like what's next, help me figure out what that looks like. Like
Yeah.
I think as a boss or as a manager, it's a lot easier to manage someone who really takes their own career into their hands, or their
Yeah.
own learning into their hands. And it just makes it easier to like actually work with them too, because then like I got as a manager, right, I have my own things that I need to worry about. And it's like, well, if I'm going to put all this energy into somebody who doesn't really care, then like
Yeah.
it's just, it helps. That might sound like, nepotism isn't the right word, but it might sound like identifying people who you're going to work on. But I think you need to do it. I think you need to help your boss identify that you're someone that you want to work on, or that wants to be
Yeah.
worked on, or
Yeah. Definitely being proactive about your own
Mhm.
career,
Mhm.
because there's so many different ways to go, especially like in like our, you know, not industry, but like our career field, I
Yeah.
guess. There are so many different ways to go. There are
Mhm.
people that start out as analysts, and then they're like developers
Mhm.
or project managers or
Uh-huh.
architects, or like management or sales or
Yeah.
whatever. There's so many different ways to go,
Yep.
and I think you take the guesswork out of management, management's hands, it makes it a lot easier on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you being on. I appreciate you being on tonight. Really looking forward to the next time that you're on so that you can finish talking about your journey.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of other
cool,
in the next month I have a lot of really cool things happening that I can't talk about right now, but I would like to. So we'll follow up with that stuff on the next one.
Yeah, definitely. And for the audience out there, if you guys like this, share it, repost it, invite other people. Next time, it happens every Monday evening, 6 p.m. Central Time. And I just, I usually put something out on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and then again on a Friday. And, love to see you guys interact with us. And look in the chat. You got somebody who is OSU in Oklahoma. So, anyway.
Yeah, I spoke at Oklahoma State.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm going out there in 2 weeks to do it again. So
awesome.
That's actually, dang, I wish we had more time because I would talk about that. Well, but just like, that's like part of I'm going to steal this last 30 seconds here. So we're going to go over. I'm sorry, Tito.
We're over already.
Oh, what a surprise. Treyson and Tito talk for way too long. I am fortunate in Oklahoma to be starting to insert myself in some of these universities and how they're and some of their analytics stuff. So Oklahoma State's one. Oklahoma City University is where we do the Oklahoma Alteryx user group. University of Central Oklahoma is like a mile from where I live now, and so I've like started having these conversations, and I'm super excited to like start talking about analytics to like a next generation. It's crazy. Oh, okay, that's that. I'm excited. I'm excited for these kids coming up. They have a lot of really cool opportunities.
Yeah,
and yeah,
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, Treyson, I'll see you in the studio. I'm gonna cut the stream, but hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.